Let us know where you guys are watching from, which province, and we'll make sure to have our answers accurate to your provincial legislation as it does vary by province. Without further ado, my name is Mackenzie Wilson. I am one of the directors here at SingleKey. Alongside, I've got Hannah Jones, who's one of our rent guarantee specialists. Uh,
Awesome.
Welcome to the show, Hannah. This is our first one in the new year, so kind of excited to get back to things. And looks like we've got a ton of Ontario people, which is great. So we'll make sure I have that conversation. And Hannah is based out in Ontario as well. I'm based here in Calgary, Alberta. So happy to speak from that side as well. So let's get into it. So we'll do a brief introduction. I guess we've already kind of covered that part with Hannah and myself. A little bit about Single Key, quick overview of our product and services. Hannah will then dive into the rent guarantee overview. We have some very common, frequently asked questions that we'll answer for you. And then anything that comes to mind, ask it anytime on the chat. And what we'll do is you'll get a wave emoji that we've queued up your question and we've captured it. And then once we get it answered, you'll get the thumbs up. So we want to make sure we don't miss anyone's question. So, as mentioned, my name is Mackenzie Wilson. I am in charge of customer engagement. I also run the largest Facebook group here in Alberta for landlords called the Alberta Landlord Community. I'm basically a landlord nerd. I love all parts, facets of this business, and that's kind of the angle I come from. Hannah, a quick introduction for yourself.
Yeah, I'm a rent guarantee specialist here at Single Key. So I deal with all things rent guarantee, signups, questions about the program. And actually, I can recognize some of the names here in the chat. I think I've spoken to some of you before. So super excited to answer more questions today.
Fantastic. Yeah, so a little bit about Single Key. We're a tech startup out of Toronto, Ontario. We just crossed over 100,000 landlords back in the fall. I think that was September. Our claim to fame is our comprehensive tenant report. I'm sure some of you've probably used it. It's got between 15 and 20 plus pages, depending on your applicant and their credit history. And really, our goal and focus has been around giving you as much data and information as possible so you can make that most informed decision when you're doing your due diligence and tenant selection for your next vacancy. We break our products down into three major categories. So, as we mentioned, we do have that tenant report. Alongside that tenant report, it probably isn't as well known, but we have a digital application service. So, you've done your viewing. The tenant says, "Great, I want to rent from you. What is the next step?" At that point, you collect their name and email, and then you'll send them a link in that email. And in that link is the online application. They click on that, they fill it all out, and then from the moment they click send, you'll have a tenant report in your inbox, usually within 3 to 5 minutes, and sometimes it's even quicker than that. We also do rent collection as well, so that's through pre-authorized debit. So the same way that you might pay a utility bill, a checking or a savings account, this is the same kind of payment service. So we'll withdraw the rent of your tenant's bank account and then deposit it into your account. We don't hold the funds or anything like that, and it's based on pre-authorized debit. And then the last part, I won't steal too much thunder from Hannah, but our rent guarantee product. It's kind of like insurance, the way to think about it, but it's a bit different on terms of the way it's structured. But essentially, it does guarantee your rent, and really a first of its kind here in Canada.
Awesome. Thanks, Mac. I'll take over here with the rent guarantee overview. We get a lot of questions about what our rent guarantee covers. So I'll go over briefly everything that you're covered for once you sign up for the program. Essentially, the main purpose of our rent guarantee is to take the risk out of renting. So, a huge fear that landlords have right now is placing a tenant and then something happens and that tenant stops paying rent and they're not able to cover their mortgage and other property expenses, right? So, with the rent guarantee, we'll cover the rent even if the tenant doesn't pay. We'll cover that rent for you for up to 12 months. We're also going to cover you in the case that the tenant breaks the lease without giving you proper notice. So, say, for example, you have a tenant, they move in, and then they just leave overnight without giving you a proper notice for your province. We'll cover you for 30 days to give you time to find a new tenant in that case. We'll also cover you if the tenant vandalizes the property. So you get tenants that they know you're moving forward with the eviction process, they're upset, they punch holes in the wall, they rip up the floor. We'll cover you for up to $10,000 there. We'll also cover you for the legal coverage. We can connect you with one of our paralegal partners to help with the eviction process, and we'll cover you for $1,500 in paralegal and eviction fees. And finally, with the rent guarantee, we're also going to cover the cost of the other services that Mac mentioned that we offer. So with every rent guarantee that you set up, we'll include that automated rent collection for you to use if you choose to. And then we'll also cover the cost of 2 tenant reports to help you find a tenant that qualifies for the program. Awesome. So I think we can move on to the next slide there. Perfect. So one of the most common questions I get asked on calls with landlords is, I'm on the rent guarantee program. What happens if my tenant does stop paying rent? And obviously, ideally, most landlords don't want that to happen, but we're here for you in case that does. So what you'd be able to do is let us know if the tenant doesn't pay. So say it's the beginning of the month, you haven't received any message from the tenant, you haven't received the rent. You can let us know by submitting a demand through your SingleKey account. You'll be able to upload any relevant documentation, and then we'll help with the next steps there. So once you've told us that your tenant has defaulted, we can actually help with sending the notice of non-payment to the tenant. So I know we have a lot of Ontario landlords here. So in that case, that would be the N4 notice. We'd be able to help mail that out to your tenant if you need assistance with that. And then after the notice expires, if the tenant still hasn't paid, we'll connect you with a paralegal to help for filing at the tenant board in your province. That way we can make sure everything's done accurately, there's no mistakes there, and get everything done in a pretty efficient manner. And then finally, it usually takes about 30 days or so for you to get your first payment from us. But then each month you'll get the rent payments, typically within the first week of the month, for the time it takes to evict the tenant. And that rent will be paid to you each month for up to 12 months.
Awesome. Great job. I'll hop into some frequently asked questions. I'll read them out. Hannah, I'll kind of let you take first crack at them and I'll add on anything that warrants a second opinion. Yeah. So, question one, can I add my pre existing tenant who is currently mid lease onto the rent guarantee program?
Yeah, we can cover mid-lease tenants as well. We normally recommend setting the tenant up at the beginning of the lease, but say this is your first time hearing about the rent guarantee and you have an existing tenant that you want to cover, we can help with getting them approved as well. We would just need a few additional documents in order to do so. So for an existing tenant, we just want to see proof that the rent has been paid on time and up to date, and a copy of the lease agreement. If the tenant is a bit newer at the property, say for example, they've only been living there for 2 or 3 months, we would want the proof of rent payments, but then also their application documents, the credit report and proof of income that you'd collected when they initially applied for the property.
What are the qualification criteria to prove a new tenant?
Yeah, so for a new tenant, we're looking for a few documents. The first would be the tenant report, which I mentioned earlier. You can run that directly through SingleKey. And with that report, you're going to get the tenant's credit history and also a public database scan. We're going to look at that report and we want to make sure that there's no bankruptcies within the past 3 years. And typically, if that's the case, we should be able to approve them. We'll also look at their proof of income documents and we'll want to make sure that the rent to income ratio is below 45% based on the gross household income. So for the proof of income documents, we just want to see something recent, has to be from within the past 30 days. It needs to specify what the tenant's gross income is. And then it also needs to have their name on it. So that's a huge thing I see when some tenants, if one thing to keep an eye out when you get their proof of income is if it's just a screenshot, for example, from their phone and it doesn't show their name on it, we would need them to download the actual PDF from their HR software so that we can confirm that it belongs to them.
Okay. Question three, what could cause my rent guarantee demand to get denied?
Yeah, this is a super common question I get because as a landlord, once you're on the rent guarantee, you know the purpose of the program is to make sure that you're covered in the case of a default. Really, there's the only way that a demand would get denied is if it doesn't meet the criteria of the rent guarantee agreement. So, for example, one of the things I mentioned was that we cover 30 days for a lease break if your tenant doesn't give you proper notice. If proper notice is given, then we wouldn't cover that 30 days in that case. That's a common one I see that gets denied. And then beyond that, we just ask that landlords work with us to evict the tenant in an efficient manner if they are defaulting, which is why we're going to connect you with that paralegal right away. So just make sure you're following the tenancy laws and guidelines in your province so that we can make sure that it's done in an efficient manner.
Yeah, and just to add some context, we often get the questions around like kind of how the program works. At the end of the day, it's kind of like insurance. So if you've got an insurance claim on a vehicle or perhaps on a home for damages, the onus is on the owner to start that claim with the insurance company. This process is very similar to that, where you as the landlord, the onus is you start the demand process with us. And on the same point as well, some other issues where claims or demands get denied is you haven't collected the proper paperwork up front. So we need leases and any other kind of paperwork, inspection reports might be needed as well. Anything that relates to managing that tenancy in your province.
No, for sure. That's a good point, Mac. With the rent guarantee, we want to be able to pay out as many landlords as possible. So we do need to follow the rules of the rent guarantee agreement. And for anyone who hasn't received a copy yet, if you haven't had a call with us, we can definitely send you a copy of the rent guarantee agreement to review before you sign up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, and the last one, it came back to me is, we have to have landlords acting above board. We've
Mhm.
had it hasn't happened a lot, but we've had a few particular occasions where landlords haven't acted within the law or the legislation of the RTA in their province, and we can't condone or support illegal actions, and that will avoid, of course, the contract. But if your intentions with following best practices, you're aware of the legislation in your province, and you act within those laws, you won't have any issues with getting a demand approved, going through the demand process. Question
Awesome.
4: rent guarantee. Is the rent guarantee still active if the tenant loses or changes their employment?
Yeah, good question. The rent guarantee is still active if the tenant's employment changes during their lease. We approve the rent guarantee based on their documents at the beginning of the lease. So we approve a tenant and then 6 months in, they lose their job or they get a new job, that's totally out of the landlord's control, right? And that's the point of the rent guarantee program, to protect you in those kinds of situations. So if you have a tenant that we initially approved based on their income at the time of the application, and then 6 months into the lease, they lose their job and they stop paying the rent, we're going to cover you in that case for the rent for the time it would take to evict them.
Yeah, definitely a core covering of the rent guarantee. Awesome.
Exactly.
Thanks, Hannah. Oh, and we kind of already covered this. I think I guess I jumped ahead. Does single key or the landlord initiate the demand process?
So we would ask you to start the process to let us know that the tenant hasn't paid and to provide us with any relevant documents. Um, so say, for example, it's the second or third of the month and you haven't gotten the rent and the tenant hasn't reached out, maybe just send them a quick reminder. We all have busy lives and sometimes forget things. So if it's a one-off situation with your tenant, good idea just to send them a quick message. If they aren't replying though and they don't pay, give us a shout and we'll help with the next steps there. We'll let you know all of the documents we need to start the process to make sure that your rent is paid. And like I mentioned a bit earlier, if you do need help with sending the notice to the tenant for the unpaid rent amount, we'll be able to assist there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into some live Q&A. So first question here. So how do single key verify the proof of employment are not fake? So the employment documentation. I'll go with that one, Hannah.
Sure. So when tenants upload proof of income to the report, we do recommend that landlords still reach out to the references as well. So a good practice is if somebody lists an employment reference, what I generally do is I'll email that reference instead of just giving them a call. Because oftentimes where someone works is associated with their email address. It's not just a random Gmail. You'll see the company name in the email address as well. So that is one way to help verify things. And I typically also look at their references on LinkedIn, which you can see where they're working there. And if you find the reference listed as an employee at the same company, it adds one extra step to the verification there. If you've done all your due diligence, we've reached out to the employer and we get that response too, and it turns out that the information was still incorrect, but we'd approve the guarantee, we'll still cover you either way.
Yeah. And just on the tenant screening side and doing this due diligence process, another best practice is, yeah, when checking employment references, is to Google the company and call the main switchboard or main line or reception, and then get transferred to the supervisor or manager or HR department, whatever's applicable for that tenant's employment. And then you can be assured you're actually talking to the company. There's always that danger that the information provided by the tenant on the application for previous landlords and employment could be a friend or a buddy posing as a fake reference. So that's one of the ways to ensure that you're doing your reference properly.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Karen. So, Deepak, you asked this question: how many members are in the single key? I'm asking this to ensure that in the event my tenant doesn't pay, we landlords do get paid. Yeah. As mentioned, we have over, I think we're actually over 110,000 landlords on our platform. But probably a better way to answer this question for you is we're actually underwritten by the Lloyd's of London underwriter. So we don't take that liability in house. That's offloaded with an insurer. Okay. Next question happens if you want to add the rent guarantee after an existing tenant has already missed or been late on payments? Would that be a flat decline if they have if they have any history of late payments with the existing tenancy? I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, yeah. Typically, Sarah, if the tenant has already been paying late or if there's already a default, we wouldn't be able to approve them for the program. For existing tenants, we would need to see a history of on time and up to date tenants. That being said, if your new tenant set up for the program.
Mhm. Yeah, and then just to add on to what Hannah said with we've got eviction specialists or paralegals, depending on what the terminology changes by province, but we have them in every province, and we are just as motivated as you to get that non-paying tenant or tenant that's damaging your property out as soon as possible. We're paying out on a policy, and at the same time, you want to get that property turned around and re-rented as soon as possible to get that rent revenue coming in. So it's very much a complementary side by side service. So that's which is why we've established really good eviction specialists or paralegals in every province. All right, Lawrence, what is the cost of the rent guarantee service? Great question.
Yeah. The rent guarantee, we have two cost options. It really just depends if you wanted to pay on a monthly basis or if you want to pay annually upfront. Either way, the rent guarantee program will initially run for 12 months, similar to a standard lease, but you have the option to pay monthly at 5.5% of the rent, or you can pay annually upfront at 5% of the total rent. So, for example, if you had a rent of $2,000, it will be 110 on a monthly basis, or it will be 1,200 annually upfront.
Awesome. Next question. There's a good question I want to answer. I saw Alex answer it. One of the qualifications is the rent cannot, so the rent to income ratio cannot exceed 45%. So that's kind of our threshold. It's pretty forgiving. I think right now, the last time we checked these market numbers, and this is based on a household, so it's not individually. So if you've got a couple renting a one or two bedroom apartment, it's their combined income that cannot exceed the 45% of rent to income ratio.
Exactly. And actually, to add on to that a bit, if you have a couple or roommates applying and they have income from different sources, we can take a look at all of that. So it's not just if one person's working, that would be the only income we can consider. If, for example, someone's receiving the Canadian Child Benefit or someone's getting pension income, we can take a look at that income as a whole.
Yeah. Alex did answers, but I think this is a good question to kind of put on for everyone. Does this apply to student rentals?
Students are a bit trickier to apply if they don't have their own proof of income or credit history. We have students in the past where they've added their parent to the application or a guarantor. So if you have someone you can add someone to the application who has the credit history and has income that they're able to show that they'd be able to support the student in case the student couldn't pay on their own, then we can often approve those cases too.
Awesome. Okay. What's the next one here? All right. Awesome. What if a new immigrant has big savings but no job? Does it still work with tenant qualification and the rent guarantee service?
Yeah, those are typically case by case. For people who are newer to the country and maybe don't have employment income yet, you could always submit what documentation they have been able to provide, and we could let you know if we'd be able to move forward or not.
Awesome. Great answer, Hannah. Paula, how is your screen service different than some of the other companies offering the service? I can take on this one. We're actually in the midst of launching a new report, so it's going to have even more information. But to quickly compare to some of our competitors out in the industry, ours is by far the most comprehensive. We show all the financial data. So really, we're arming you as the individual or mom and pop landlord with the same financial records that a bank would use before they decide to lend out on a mortgage. So you'll get full credit history on every product that an individual has. In addition, our service does include the application process, which I really enjoy. And that big difference is a lot of the all of our competitors, I don't think anyone's doing this right now, the last I checked, but all of our competitors require you to open up a form online, type in all the information. Hopefully you don't make a typo, and then pay for that report. And you do that click, and it costs you whatever the price is, 20, $30. And if they've made a typo and you don't get a result, well, then you've just spent that money without any return. Our service, the tenant will fill out all the information. They know their information best. If you've got a higher degree of getting a hit and a report back. In addition, we also allow you to turn on and off different fields. So if you're in a high demand market right now with lots of applications coming in, you're going to want to make all the fields require mandatory, a requirement, so they have to fill it out. So you get more complete reports. On the flip side, you can flip all these options, all these required fields off and make them optional. So if you're in a slow market, you're not getting a lot of applications, you're not getting as many viewings, you're going to reduce the friction in the process so you can at least still get more applications to make that decision from. I mean, that's where that power comes from to find the best tenant, is having options to choose from. In addition to that, we also allow the upload of government issued photo ID. So you can make that mandatory that they have to upload a picture of a passport or a driver's license. In addition, we can collect forms of proof of employment. So pay stubs, letter of employment, which we're really excited about. In our new report that is coming out so very soon, we have ID verification now. So I've been in situations where I've done a viewing, and then maybe a week later I get the report run, and I'm looking at and I've done this a few times. I've looked at the report and I'm looking at the driver's license they have uploaded. It's like 8 years old, or the passport, and I'm like, is this the person I saw 5 days ago? And I'm not really sure. So what we've done now is we've gone to a third party service where we do a selfie and we capture the government issued ID and we do a comparison. And then we have a script or an algorithm that will run in the background, and it will give you our confidence level that selfie is in fact the person on the driver's license. And we'll say we're 95 or 98% confident that is that person. But from your perspective, you're given a really strong foundation of paperwork to start your tenancy. And especially if your tenancy goes MIA and does a midnight move, it's going to be very difficult to go after the person if you don't even have the correct identification on file. There's probably more things we do differently, but I don't know how long you want me to ramble for. But that's hopefully a short but long summary of our competitive advantages. Oh, and then Paul has the last question here. Would you guys be willing to make a similar presentation to our local law enforcement? Absolutely. Definitely. We also do. So this is one of two webinars that we've got in play right now. Our other webinar is how to read a 10 report. And I typically dive into details on the due diligence and even a little bit of the pre-screen side as well. I love this stuff. I've spoken at different landlord associations across the country in Alberta and Ontario as well. So we'd love to come out and participate in. And it's really up our alley of risk mitigation. There's a ton of processes that you put in play that really make this business of being in the rental industry either more enjoyable than from the stress of making a mistake where it can be quite daunting. So yeah, I'll reach out to you, Paula. Thank you. Awesome. A recording will be available as well. That comes in the follow-up email that we send out. Of course, if there's any questions that we haven't answered that you think of after the fact, ask anyone on our team. We've got Alex in the chat, Hannah as well, or you can send it to info@SingleKey.com, and someone from our team will probably get back to you.
For sure. And actually, sorry, I just see one more question coming in here from Dave. When can I apply for the program, on receiving rent application or after the rent agreement? Usually, we would recommend applying right away when you get the rental application. That way, if you want to sign up for the program, we can confirm that the tenants meet our criteria and that we have all of the documents before you actually sign the lease, as it makes it a bit trickier to get additional documentation from the tenant after you've signed the lease agreement with them.
Yeah, so I think kind of to elaborate on what or add to what Hannah said there, once you've made that decision to select the tenant and they're in that process of now you're pushing out that lease to get or the lease to get signed, have that conversation right away with us. There's some time it takes to collect documents and do all that. So you want to do that concurrently once you've picked out your tenant.
Exactly. And our new actually makes it super easy. Once you get the tenant reports back, you can apply for the rent guarantee directly from that page as well. And then as soon as we get that rent guarantee application, we'll review all of the documents and typically we can let you know same or next day whether it's approved or not or if there's anything else we would need.
Awesome. If there are some students and a guarantor are included in the lease, and let's say after a couple months, one of them moves out, but gets another student to replace a spot, how would the situation be handled? That's a really good question. I think that's more of a
Hmm.
one-off. Is that something we need to
Yeah.
take away, Hannah?
Yeah, it's a bit of a one-off situation. In the past, I mean, with the rent guarantee in general, if you have multiple leaseholders and one person leaves without giving notice, they just move out and they don't tell you or they don't have the proper signed documentation to remove them from the lease, you're still covered with the rent guarantee in that kind of situation. Say it is a situation where you have one person moving out and a new person moving in who's going to be replacing them on the lease. Usually, for the rent guarantee, we would just ask if you're able to provide the proof of income and report for the new leaseholder. That'd be helpful just so that we can add that to our files.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it. Next month's webinar will be on how to read a credit report, as well as some of the functionality with our online screening tools. Um, we'll catch you guys then, and thanks very much for spending your time with us. Take care and have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. See ya.